from both sides of the planet. You're listening to the Redskins Capital Connection. Now here's your hosts, Chad and Mark.
Hello Redskins fans, and thank you for tuning in for another edition of the Redskins Capital Connection podcast. My name is Chad, I'm your host coming at you from Canberra, Australia. My trusty co-host every single week is my good friend Mark, coming at you from Richmond, Virginia. We have both sides of the Redskins globe covered. Mark, how you doing this morning, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Chad, because I got an extra 30 minutes sleep last night because Monday Night Football was kind enough not to go into overtime for the second week in a row. So, I'm feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning and ready to talk Redskins football with you and, of course, Liz Clarke, who joins us later on the podcast.
Yes, Liz Clarke, our good friend from the Washington Post, is coming on to have a chat very quickly. We'll make sure that we actually hit the record button when we have her on. For the listeners who want a little peek behind the curtain, we're re-recording this because we just started talking about 10 minutes ago and then very quickly realized that for some reason it wasn't recording. So we're doing this again. We get a do-over. This is, free podcast for us, so let's see if we can make sure we get this one in the can afterwards. But lots happening around Redskins Park this week. Obviously, we're coming out of Foxborough with the loss. No Redskins fans will be surprised that we're coming out with a loss, but there is some storylines to talk about there. The main thing is the drops, killed any, hope that the Redskins had, especially when Kirk Cousins played, quite frankly, a really good game, but his receivers just did him no favors. As well as that, there was a couple of comments, from Deshaun Jackson and Jay Gruden that we'll touch on separately and also with Liz Clarke, I'm sure. But, spoiler alert, I don't have too many concerns or cares about those comments. But we'll get into those in more detail later. Mark, what was your biggest takeaway from this Patriots game? Because there was a lot going on in this game, more than I think a lot of people might realize.
Well, you just referenced it, Chad. My biggest takeaway is the self-inflicted wounds. And of course, one of the things that we didn't actually reference in our outstanding intro that we didn't record a few minutes ago was the fact that after the Patriots scored their opening drive touchdown, which a lot of Redskin fans took as showing the Redskins were unprepared coming out of the bye, I don't buy that because you've got the number one offense in the NFL that scores touchdowns on opening drives regularly, playing at best a middle-of-the-pack defense. So I don't view that as shocking. The fact that they came down and scored, then they try the surprise onside kick. Now, Chad, in my opinion, there's two reasons a team tries a surprise onside kick. One, they don't think they're better than the team they're playing, so they need some kind of advantage that they otherwise would not get.
Bit of X factor.
Yeah, that clearly is not the case here. In my opinion, it's the second reason, that you don't fear what that other team can do to you if this doesn't work. Okay, now, to the Redskins' credit, they weren't surprised by this onside kick. Ryan Grant was right there. The ball basically came right to him, and he should have had it, but he lost it. That would be the first of many drops we would see on the day by Redskin receivers. New England gets the ball. Now, that ends up not hurting us because we get the turnover, and then that's when the comedy of errors starts with Pierre Garçon dropping a pass that leads to an interception. He would later drop another one on a 4th and 10 play where you can question whether or not the Redskins should have kicked a field goal in that situation. We can get into that later if you want. The Derek Carrier drop, huge. Just so many self-inflicted wounds that you can't afford against any team in the NFL, much less a team like the Patriots that will eat you alive for that stuff. And my ultimate takeaway from that is, had the Redskins not had those self-inflicted wounds, they could have put at least some pressure on New England, who was really struggling along the offensive line with injuries. And had we forced them to drop back and pass more, maybe we would have seen more mistakes like Tom Brady throwing the ball and Keenan Robinson intercepting it, which because he was having to throw the ball so quickly, in part because that's what they do, in part because I think he was nervous about his offensive line.
Yeah, but I think the only struggle the Patriots had was struggling to get out of second gear. They looked like a team who was going through the motions against a practice squad, if we're being honest. And, that's a sad indictment on the Redskins. And I think one of the most frustrating things coming out of this game for me was the complete lack of preparation and, lack of drive from the Redskins' ground game on offense and the Redskins' defense in terms of stopping the opponent's ground game, New England's ground game. It's been discussed ad nauseum since the game that the Redskins only got 37 yards of rushing on offense between Matt Jones and Alfred Morris. But for me, the more concerning thing was that with the Patriots offensive line that was missing a bunch of guys and had fluctuations during the game as guys became unavailable, they still racked up 161 yards on the ground. And it wasn't with Dion Lewis, who unfortunately did his ACL. It was with Garrett Blount, who is nothing special. And no disrespect to him, because he torched us for 129 yards. But at the end of the day, he's just a guy. Like, he's not an Adrian Peterson or a Le'Veon Bell or a Todd Gurley. He's not anywhere near that echelon of player. He is a serviceable pounder who's not going to be, overly elusive, but he's not overly fast, and he's not overly, he's not the kind of guy who's, famous for running over people. He's just a guy, and he torched the crap out of the Redskins defense, which is a huge concern for me, man. Huge concern.
Yeah, that's a big... I mean, you could always say, okay, Devonta Freeman, he's really good. Chris Ivory, he's really good. Doug Martin, he's really good. You can use that justification against the guys that have torched us the last 3 weeks. You cannot use that justification with LeGarrette Blount, who, while not a bad player, is nothing special. And you just referenced it. The defensive inability to stop the run is more concerning to me than the offense's inability to run. Now, the offense's inability to run is concerning. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this at all. But the fact of the matter is the Redskins have been pretty far behind in the last couple of games, and that's going to limit your run opportunities, and your run numbers are not going to look as good. But that is still a problem because you need to get some continuity developed in the run game, and that doesn't just happen within a game. That happens over the course of a season. You have to run the ball to get better at it. You need repetition in a game to get yourself to what they call midseason form, and the Redskins aren't anywhere close to that right now. And I believe that there's no identity to the run game in terms of is Matt Jones the lead dog? Is Alfred Morris the lead dog? I just think there's way too much confusion right now in the Redskins run game for it to be successful. The run defense is a huge problem. A lot of people pointed to Terrence Knighton's absence in this game as a problem, which is a fair point to make, but it completely ignores the fact that he was there the prior 3 games when the Redskins run defense was getting torched also. Yep.
And look, I don't think either Matt Jones or Alfred Morris can be called a lead dog if neither of them are running the ball more than 10 times a game. Like, if we want to be a running back by committee, that's fine, but use either Matt Jones or Alfred Morris as a change of pace back, not a change every, second possession back, because that's just not going to work. Both of these running backs are guys that need to get into a rhythm, and if they can't get into a rhythm, we're going to see what we had on Sunday, which was both of them averaging 2.5 yards a carry. But we're focusing on the negatives there. There were some positives in this game on both sides of the ball. As we mentioned previously, Kirk Cousins had himself a quietly good game. The receivers, dropped too many passes and did him no favors. And even though the stat sheet says Kirk Cousins had an interception, he is 0% at fault for that interception. That was just bounced straight off the hands of Pierre Garçon, who was 2 or 3 yards away from his closest defender. That was, a pure drop, plain and simple. With the worst possible outcome, of course. But Kirk Cousins, I think he won some fans over with this game. He played strongly, and he never looked overawed. I think it's not unfair to say that some of the Redskins players, and look, our boy Dookie Inacho even mentioned on Twitter that maybe some of them are a little bit starstruck, for lack of a better word, going into New England and seeing the Patriots up close. But Kirk Cousins is not one of those players. He looked fine.
Yeah, I think that in Kirk Cousins' case, I think he is what he is, and I think he's gotten better as the season's gone on. But the point is that Kirk Cousins is not yet a quarterback, and I don't know that he will be a quarterback that can carry you to victory, okay, against a superior. Like, he can't overcome the deficiencies in other areas of the offense. So when Kirk Cousins is making plays, and in the first half against New England, he wasn't starstruck. He wasn't intimidated. He was making plays. He was seeing the field. He was hitting the right guy. And you can't blow those plays. When Kirk Cousins is a snowball effect quarterback, or at least has been that in the past, in that when things start to go bad for him, they snowball, they get worse. And when things go well for him, they snowball, they get better. Okay, so if we're catching the ball early and we're having a successful drive, and let's think about it. The Pierre Garçon drop for an interception. Pierre Garçon had room to run if he catches that ball. Derek Carrier, maybe not a touchdown. That's a 40, 50-yard gain. You cannot leave plays like that on the field. That's simply unacceptable, and I'm sorry, I don't accept Jay Gruden's explanation that you just chalk it up to a bad day. You just, at that point, that's something that
But
needs
was
to
it
be
windy,
addressed.
Mark?
well, perhaps it was windy, or perhaps the receivers were slipping as they were dropping the ball. But regardless, you cannot leave plays like that, and it needs to be stated. And maybe he's doing it behind the scenes. This is unacceptable.
Yeah. But look, there were some other positives to come out of the game. So let's run through a couple of them real quickly. A couple that stood out to me. The Redskins are currently on a streak, I guess you could say. We've now allowed one sack or fewer in 6 consecutive games for the first time since 1996. So even though the Redskins' run blocking on the offensive line has been terrible, our pass protection, combined with Kirk Cousins getting the ball out quickly, has been solid as a rock. So that's an odd positive to be able to hang our hat on against a team that has a quietly decent front seven. Another thing that I really liked is the continued development of Jamison Crowder. For the third time in the last 5 games, he led or tied the team in receptions for the game. So this week he outright led with 6 catches. He's coming on really, really nicely. No, he's not at the same level as your Amari Coopers for your rookie wide receivers, but he looks like he's going to be a good find for the Redskins.
Well, and there's another thing. I know it's hard to come up with positives when you say the team only lost by 17. But the last time the Redskins went to Foxborough, they came in with a team that went to the playoffs that year and got blown out 52-7. Okay,
yep.
and the 7 was an by the way touchdown late in the game.
So was our touchdown in this game.
Right, exactly. In spite of the fact that the Redskins had so many self-inflicted wounds, you know what? There was still a chance well into the third quarter of that game that if the Redskins could make a play here or a play there, it's a football game. Okay? Now, I don't think they were ever going to be really a threat to win, but they actually held into the game for a while. And to hold in a game against the defending world champions, undefeated world champions, team that's playing the best football in the league right now, in their house, to play that poorly and to still have a shot indicates something positive. Maybe it's the fact that they're not quitting, they're hanging in there and fighting hard the whole time. The point is, that it's something I guess you can draw off of as a positive, because if you had told me we're going to have all these drops, we're going to lose a surprise onside kick, they're going to score on their opening drive, all these things that are going to, that LeGarrette Blount was going to run for 100 plus and a touch, I would have certainly expected it to be uglier than it actually was. So there's something out there that the Redskins are doing that I think is different than the past. It may not show up in the record this year, but I'm not one of these people who believes no matter what you got to get rid of Jay Gruden at the end of the year. I think you sort of I hate to go GM on you, but I think you sort of evaluate at the end of the season.
Yeah, well, I think at this point of the season, well, throughout the entire season and before this is overall an evaluation season for Scott McCloughan. If the Redskins jag some wins along the way, fantastic. But at the end of the day, if we win 4 or 5 games max for the year, I don't think it's a disaster in Scott McCloughan's first year. As long as we have things that are, steps in the right direction, like rookie development, like knowing whether or not Kirk Cousins is the answer or not, like knowing whether Jay Gruden is the long-term answer or not. Things like that. That's where you build. A rebuild starts from scratch if it's done right, and this is a start from scratch year for Scott McCloughan. But let's move on, because it is time to to be joined by our good friend Miss Liz Clarke. So let's call her up now and get her on the line.
Let's do it.
Returning for her second appearance this season on the Redskins Capital Connection podcast is our good friend Miss Liz Clarke from the Washington Post. Liz, you're up bright and early to talk to us. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing just fine, Chad. I hope you're fine on the other side of the world.
I'm fine, and I hope Mark's fine on your side of the planet. Mark's here, obviously, as always. So let's jump straight into it. Let's talk about the New England game briefly, because
yes.
There's a lot to cover. And while I was talking, I dropped my microphone. So there's a lot of drops going on around the Redskins at the moment.
There you go. Drop number 8.
But yeah, I mean, you're around this team almost on a daily basis. Was there any extra level of frustration you could sense amongst the playing group or the coaches, specifically regarding those drops, or was it just chalked up to it wasn't our day?
I mean, the words "it wasn't our day" came out of Jay Gruden's mouth afterward. In the locker room afterward, I sensed kind of just bewilderment. I respected, Pierre Garçon, because he obviously wasn't happy with the outcome or his performance, but he just said, drops are unacceptable in the NFL. We just can't have it, and meaning that was sort of directed at himself, and we have to fix it. And I don't know what more needs to be said by a receiver, but. The underlying concern, at least for my part, it speaks to a much, much broader issue in the way the Redskins traditionally practice and prepare and play games, with kind of an unspoken attitude of we can turn on and off excellence. We can get everything right when it matters,
we'll do it on
we
the
don't
nine.
have to. Yeah, and it's just they're not good enough. And even teams that are good enough don't approach it that way. I mean, it was last summer that the Patriots practiced with the Redskins jointly, as the team did this year with Houston. And in that 3-day window of practice, we all, if you were at all paying attention, we all got a dose of what the most apparently random, meaningless preseason practice is like for the New England Patriots. And it's full game intensity with, I don't know that I saw a ball hit the ground, between quarterback and receiver on the Patriots. But anything that wasn't, pinpoint just right got, a death, paralyzing stare of this is not acceptable. This is not what we do. So, until the Redskins go about their work that way, I'm unmoved in many ways by whatever remorse follows a sloppy game, because it's sort of, that's not surprising that a sloppy game follows kind of, I hate to say lax practices, but this attitude, and it was reflected in subtle ways all week. Like, well, against the Super Bowl champions, we cannot afford to have unforced errors. Against a team that good, we can't afford this. As opposed to, we never can afford that. It's just
that's a great point.
It's a subtle point, and maybe it concerns only me, but I do think you perform the way you practice and play, particularly in a hostile environment. Hate to use a cliche, but on the road, where, of course, they're winless on the road this year.
One of the receivers that didn't have a drop this Sunday was Deshaun Jackson, and he didn't have a problem with letting us know it after the game. He also said, and he probably didn't mean it in the way that it came across on paper, that he can't call the plays and he can't throw the passes. And Jay Gruden then later responded, with the comments about Deshaun Jackson missing OTAs and all the games he's missed. Is that indicative of a problem, or are we just parsing the words too much, and it's just guys saying what they say and it means nothing more than what they said?
Well, it's twofold. I mean, it is, for media purposes, easy to lift those quotes, pounce on, put it in a headline, and make it sound like, oh, here's a diva who's going to destroy what locker room, good vibe there is. I listened to the whole response in context. It was not incendiary. It was much more benign than it sounds when those two quotes are disembodied. It was kind of part of a longish, low-key response on, he said, what opportunities I get, I think I'm going to be able to do a good job with that. I can't call the plays for me. I can't throw the ball myself. So when the coaches and quarterback call my number, I'll be there and doing what I need to do. So it's a total glass half full, glass half empty. Now, this is overlaid against the sort of notorious social media comment Deshaun made last year at a point of frustration, just saying, you can't do epic, expletive with basic people.
Right.
So we wouldn't have bleeped you if you said it.
He's hardly, the first or only wide receiver in the NFL to see football through a me first prism. This is about me and my catches. And I don't have any problem with that. You kind of want that. It's kind of a position on an island, but you don't want anything that's going to breed dissent and become a problem. I don't think it's that yet, but I do think that the issue of him opting out of the optional workouts in the spring, and his seeming disinterest in taking part in a lot of team activities, and he did injure a shoulder early in training camp, and he did injure the hamstring in the first quarter of the first game. So he didn't play any of the preseason. He's not been available to the team, and I am not a columnist, but I wrote a quasi column in spring immediately, just saying this is a problem that he's not showing up for what I understand are optional workouts. I understand it's in the CBA. You don't have to do it. But the point is, in fact, I think I even said he's not going to be able to throw the ball to himself. I mean, ironically, he comes back with those same words. But, this team is not good enough, and not I'm not putting down the players and saying this. Their results are not good enough, and their time together, specifically, there's been so much upheaval in quarterbacks in the roster, constant churn on this roster. So there is no such thing as a 15, 10, or even 5-year rapport between a quarterback and a receiving core with the Redskins. And I do know that Peyton Manning has a fit if his receiving core is not there in full in the optional workouts, and Brady as well. It's just not, you don't opt out, and those quarterbacks seem to throw a lot of touchdowns, and they need confidence in the guy they're going to throw to, and at a minimum you need to know what is this my guy's closing speed, what's his ability to separate. I mean, it's almost a math equation. If you're really talking about fitting a ball into tight coverage, you need to know exactly how much quicker Deshaun might be than, Jamison Crowder or whomever. And so to me, this is no surprise. Jay was right on point in saying, well, here are some of the issues why he only had 3 catches for 15 yards in this game, and he was a non-factor. But, Jay certainly had the opportunity to say that in spring and summer and fall, and I believe was asked to, and he never, at least publicly, had a problem with it. Nor did anybody on the team.
Yeah, and there's an interesting quirk with that because, you are right. He did opt out of the OTAs, and then during the mini camp and, in training camp before he hurt himself, anytime, the practices started with the second and third team offense doing wide receiver drills, which is where Kirk Cousins was, because at the time RG3 was still the starting quarterback, Deshaun Jackson wasn't working with those drills. He was doing the punt return drills. So basically all throughout camp and preseason, Deshaun Jackson never practiced with the eventual starter and quarterback, Kirk Cousins. So that was just an interesting thing as well. But let's move on.
Yeah, although just as a, it was last season when Kirk, in his limited play last season, the Cousins-Deshaun connection was the most exciting thing on offense.
That's true, yes.
So, Deshaun knows full well that Cousins, among the 3, is going to be the guy who gets in the deep ball. There's no animosity there, or there's no disrespect for Cousins at all.
But you're right, it's about that cohesion.
But you speak to the bigger point. Yeah, it's time together. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about what Jay Gruden identified as his priority going into the bye week, 2 and a bit weeks ago now, which was fixing the run game. Obviously wasn't fixed against New England, although, he said it was partly because the Redskins fell into a hole early in the game and had to pass more than they wanted, etc. This week against the Saints, they are the 24th ranked run defense in the league. They average, allowing opponents 4.7 yards per carry. If the Redskins' run game struggles again this week, how is the mood going to be inside that organization? Because this is a team that was built around a ground and pound identity, and this is an identity that's been completely missing for over a month now.
Yeah, I don't know that, we as the press corps are going to sense like a DEF CON situation or another Code Red. I mean, I don't know that there's going to be seismic change. I think there remains great confidence in Bill Callahan as the offensive line coach. My sense is Randy Jordan, the running backs coach, is very good at his job and terrific at what he does. The offensive line pass protected very well against New England. There was only the one sack. But the blocking wasn't there, but that's not strictly on the line, as Gruden keeps saying. They don't have receivers who are particularly effective blockers. They're all really small, and certainly Deshaun Jackson is not interested in that aspect of the receiving job. And the tight ends need to help too. But Alfred Morris is not he's just not productive. And I do think there's facts and there's substance to the record that Alfred is most effective after about 12, 15 carries. Yep. But when he only gets 4 carries, you're not going to see that. But for the first time yesterday, to sort of come to a meaningful point, for the first time yesterday, Jay actually kind of pointed. I hate to say pointed, but highlighted the obvious, which is part of this is in the running backs' hands themselves. And he kind of said, we're kind of at the point where if there's not a hole, if they don't see a hole, they got to make a hole. You got to just do it. You know what I mean? And I'm not at all implying that Matt Jones is averse to contact. I think he actually enjoys it.
Yep,
but
we've seen that.
It's on everybody. There's not a single weak link here, but it's a recipe for disaster. It's not just an element of the offense that's not contributing, but it so handicaps the passing game for obvious reasons. When they're one-dimensional, it's like they're so easy to stop. So,
Liz, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just sputtering. Go ahead.
The last time the Redskins played the Saints, Redskins fans' collective eyes popped out like it was a cartoon because it was the first game of the RG3 era. And as Tony Kornheiser called it, the beginning of the era of unbridled optimism. The last time the Saints came to Washington was that just terribly entertaining game that unfortunately the Redskins lost. Probably the best game of Devin Thomas' career, and the Saints had that crazy play right before halftime where the Redskins intercepted the pass, but the receiver stripped it from the defensive back as he was trying to return it and ran it in for a touchdown right before halftime. My point is these games with New Orleans always seem to be entertaining in some way. What are you expecting to see this week?
It's such an emotionally wrought fan base here. I kind of empathize. I mean, they've had so little to cheer about for so long, and the days of pride in the Redskins' glory are just receding. It's like the tiniest point on a faraway horizon now.
Right.
So, but it's a pity that they've become, as a result, so quick to boo their own and then so quick to cheer. And I think, it doesn't really sit well with the team or the players. I mean, so obviously after falling behind 24-0 the other week against Tampa Bay, they were just getting roundly booed and heckled by their own. And then when they made the comeback, it's like the fan base was nuts. So, I guess I just expect wild swings of momentum in this game. I've not studied the Saints as much as I intend to, but I certainly did watch the game against the Giants, the absolute shootout.
Right.
400 points to 401.
49-49, and then you finally get, of all things, Kai Forbath, sealing the victory, which is good for Kai Forbath, great for him. So obviously you would say Drew Brees remains a quarterback to be feared, and the Redskins' defensive backs are still not healthy. The pass rush is, if there's something beyond non-existent, I don't know what it is, but it's there. It's unbelievably sad. I mean, not only did I mean, just to flip back to the Patriots game. So the Patriots were down to like 4 offensive linemen. I mean, it was dire in that game when they lost their left tackle. No, it was, but as the Patriots do, they don't lose so much of a step when they go to their second backup and even third, or even have to draft a tight end, to fill in. So needless to say, their offensive line was not tip top. The Redskins' entire defense got not one sack on Brady. And do you know how many times they hit Brady in the game?
Twice, I believe.
Once. There was just nothing. And so, and I understand Kerrigan has a broken hand and is recovering from knee surgery. Trent Murphy, I don't know how much longer he's going to be cast as a pass rusher, because I'm just not sure that's his strong suit. And Preston Smith has more ability than, disciplined play at the moment as a rookie is not shocking. One small point that people may not reflect on, among the coaching changes this past offseason is that they got rid of their outside linebackers coach, and they don't have an outside linebackers coach, and that the linebackers coach, formerly inside backers coach, is coaching all the linebackers. And I just can't help but wonder, boy, maybe getting rid of Brian Baker wasn't the greatest idea, especially since you're going to bring in a rookie pass rusher. So, so to your point, looking at the Saints, it's a tall order for the pass rush and the defensive backs of the Redskins. Meantime, to stay with it, the running game must get going, as you've alluded to. The running game should get going, and given that they gave up 49 points to the Giants, you'd like to think the Redskins could put up
10,
42, or 5, 6, whatever touchdowns. I mean, they really may need to have an explosive offensive day to stay with it. And I don't know that things are humming right now.
Well, they're certainly not, but we know regardless of what happens, you're going to be all over it. Liz, we love having you on the show every time you come on. For anyone who's not following Liz on Twitter, get her at Liz Clarke tweet. That's Clarke with an E on the end as well. She's a great follow on Twitter. Obviously her work in the Washington Post is excellent, but make sure you're following her on Twitter as well, because she's good fun.
You are so dear. You both are just such a delight to talk to, and have a wonderful day or evening, depending where you live.
Well, it's almost midnight here, so I'll be asleep soon.
There you go. It's a wonderful mid-morning.
All righty, Liz.
Well, thanks again.
No worries.
Thanks
very much.
All right, welcome back. That was a fantastic interview with Liz Clarke on the Redskins Capital Connection. She's such a positive person. I mean, like she's always, you can just sort of tell she seems like someone who's always happy. Like every company anyone's ever worked for, there's always that one nice person, the person that's just nicer than anyone else. Liz Clarke is that person everywhere she's ever worked.
Well, I can tell you, she is numerous Redskins players' favorite reporter. For example, D'Angelo Hall is very effusive in his love for Liz Clarke and has called her out on Twitter saying, this is my favorite reporter. And, she's not soft on the players and she doesn't, pull her punches, but she is just... She's got something about her. Her demeanor, her approach is fantastic. So, love having her on. That was the second time we've had her on this season, and both times have been great. Now, let's move on to the New Orleans game this week, because if we lose this, we're in 3-6 and a bit of a hole. If we win this, 4-5, we're right in play for the division still. So this is a huge game against a pretty damn tough opponent, because Drew Brees is playing some brilliant football at the moment, Mark. Mark Ingram for the Saints, sneakily one of the best players in the league as well. He is consistent each week. I thought I saw that he's, not including quarterbacks, a top 5 fantasy scorer this year as well. So he is definitely a player to watch for the Redskins as well. Mark, what are your, I don't want to say predictions. What are you looking out for from the Redskins against the Saints team this week? Because as you said versus Liz, these games the last couple of times, there's always been something special about them.
Yeah, well, first of all, to reference what you talked about with shot for the division, right now the Redskins are one game out in the loss column. Okay, one game. That's all. At 3-5, one game out. So you get a win here. You get to 4-5. The Giants are playing the Patriots this week. I believe the Eagles have the Dolphins. I'm struggling to remember who they have this week, but I believe it's one of the Florida teams, either the Dolphins or the Bucks.
You keep talking, and I'll check it.
Okay, you do that. So the point is that the Redskins can actually, with a win this week, possibly be in a tie in the loss column with the New York Giants, who I do expect will lose to the Patriots. I mean, the Giants certainly are capable of beating the Patriots if they have a really good day and the Patriots have an off day. And the Giants seem to do well against the Patriots, which is something I just can't typically explain, as evidenced by their 2 Super Bowl victories over them. And even if the Eagles were to win to get to 5-4 versus our 4-5, we've got the win over the Eagles, so we're a game back, but with the tiebreaker. So as below average as the Redskins have played overall this year, there's a chance for them to bounce back. And now the New Orleans Saints, there've been a couple of crazy games against them. And 4 years ago, when RG3's first game, sort of shocked the world, put up 40 points against them. So I'm really hoping, based on what I've seen out of the New Orleans Saints the last couple of weeks, New York Giants have a pretty good offense, Odell Beckham, Eli Manning, but to give up 49 to them, I understand there was a defensive score in there, but that seemed a little silly to make that complaint when a team scores 49 points. And then, of course, New Orleans, lost a game to the Tennessee Titans and Marcus Mariota, who's an impressive rookie quarterback, but it's just kind of surprising to see anyone do that to New Orleans, who had been pretty red hot lately. So,
well, that was the classic "we just fired our bad coach" game, though. We see that every year in the NFL. As soon as a coach gets fired, the team under an interim coach just looks fired up and passionate, for a week or two before they regress back to their normal crappy selves.
Right, so, the Dan Campbell effect, as you would put it this year.
Or the Wade Phillips effect a couple of years ago.
Right, but Dan Campbell this year comes in, takes over, beats 2 AFC South teams in a row, and then people think, okay, well, we've got this turned around, and then he moves out of the AFC South to play some games, and he's struggled ever since then. So you could be right. That could be what it is. We've gotten rid of Ken Wisenhunt. But the point is that Eli Manning and Marcus Mariota have torched the Saints. So I'm expecting the Redskins, if the Redskins have any chance to do anything this year, I'm expecting the Redskins to torch the Saints. The question is, will they outscore the Saints? Because the Saints are putting up points against everybody. Drew Brees, over the years, has had some rough games against the Redskins. It's one of those things I can't explain. He's one of the few star players that I've seen struggle against the Redskins. I'm hoping that continues this week, and he has an off day. The Saints have guys at receiver that are, as you say, just a guy, but they've got so many just a guys, that you've got to cover all of them. And Ben Watson's actually having an outstanding sort of resurrection season this late in his career. So I expect this to be a high-scoring game.
I'm going to be contrarian. For some reason, I think this is going to be a really dour game. I haven't looked at the weather forecast yet, but it is at FedEx Field, so the weather can be a factor. But I think just regardless, both teams are going to struggle to move the ball for some reason. Just an odd feeling, because it goes against everything that would be logical. The Redskins defense hasn't really been able to stop the ball either in the air or on the ground, and the Saints defense is certainly the same. Rob Ryan has been making funny faces on the sidelines for the past couple of weeks as he watches oppositions put up 400 and 500 yards against him. But for some reason, I've just got a weird gut feeling that this is going to be like a 13-17 at most sort of game. And if the Redskins can come out of it, it will be a big win, because the schedule in the NFC East this week, you already mentioned the Giants are playing the Patriots. The Eagles do have the Dolphins, and it's in Philadelphia, so you'd have to say the Eagles will be favourite in that. But the Eagles, I wouldn't be confident for them beating anyone each week. They're a team that has a lot of problems. And the Cowboys go to Tampa Bay, and there's nothing that tells me Matt Castle can beat anyone at the moment. So this division, for the time being, is still wide open, and the Redskins have some tough games coming up, because after the Saints, we go to Carolina, and if Carolina keeps playing the way they've been playing in their first 8 undefeated weeks, it's going to be very tough to come out of there with a win. And after that, our last 6 games include 4 division games against the NFC East, and our 2 non-division games in there against Chicago and against Buffalo, both winnable games. So this division, if the Redskins are good enough to beat New Orleans this week, is still wide open. So a big test for the Redskins this week, because if they lose, I think the door is shut. This is one of those weeks. I don't think if they lose this week, they can still say, oh, we're only 2 games back, because with the way the schedule is, 2 games back is 2 games too many.
Well, I'm going to slightly disagree with you. I completely agree with you that this is an important game, and that the Carolina game looming is certainly a tough game. I don't view it in the same vein that I view the New England Patriots game, but it is definitely a tough game. The fact that they're NFC East games doesn't impress me. I mean, I understand that it's a divisional game. The teams know each other. That they're always going to be interesting games, and certainly rivalry games that are typically tight. But these are not great teams, and neither is Buffalo and Chicago. I read a lot of Redskin fans on Twitter with the gloom and doom based on the schedule. Why? What's so tough about this schedule other than the fact that we've got to play Carolina in Carolina? None of these teams are overly impressive. You've got a 5-4 team. You've got a 4-4 team. You've got a 2-6 team. Chicago, I think, just got to 3-5 last night, and I don't know what Buffalo's record is off the top of my head. But that schedule is impressive in name only, in my opinion, other than the Carolina game. Now, again, you're right about the divisional games typically are tough games. So I don't want to dismiss that, but tough games also mean you got a chance to win them, because they're usually tough for the other guys too. Those are not just tough games for the Redskins. They're tough for the Giants. They're tough for the Eagles. They're tough for the Cowboys. And hopefully if the Redskins can build some positive momentum, to be fair, not something they've shown they can do, hopefully they can win some of those games, as many of them as possible. And each of those games, that means we've got 4 games left that are 2-game swings, that a win for us and a loss for the other team if we're able to put it on them. But let's focus. Let's beat New Orleans this week, get to 4-5, and just see what happens with the other teams.
Yep, I agree. Couldn't agree more. So, you know what that means it's time to do then, Mr. Phillips?
You know what? I'm actually, this is a little bit delicious to me, Chad, because so many times this year, you've had to do the 3-2-1 after a loss one time, but I believe it was the Atlanta game where there actually was, so you could find some guys to give the 3-2-1 to. I think you've got a tough go of it this week. I think there's maybe one guy that looks to me like he's a lock for the 3-2-1 this week. But I think you've got a tough row to hoe this week. So I'm interested in hearing who you've got this week.
All right, well, without further ado, let's get into it. And like I do every week, I'll just give you a quick breakdown of what we're doing, Redskins fans. So if you're a new listener, we do a game MVP vote after every week. We do it in a 3-2-1 format where the best player gets 3 votes, the second best player gets 2 votes, and the third best player gets 1 vote. And we track it on our website, redskinscapitalconnection.com. And at the end of the year, we will crown our 2015 Redskins MVP. So my votes this week, for the 3 votes for the best on ground, I am giving it to Trent Williams. The first time he's appeared in the votes this year, which is amazing. And I think that's because we take him for granted too often. But on a day where almost, the entire rest of the offensive line struggled, Trent Williams was solid as a rock, going against pretty good opposition. He was blocking guys like Chandler Jones all day. He was blocking guys like Alan Branch at points, with the Patriots moving guys around. And he gave up 0 quarterback hurries, 0 quarterback hits, and 0 quarterback sacks. Trent Williams is just a stud, and Redskins fans, I don't want to say we take him for granted, because we don't. He's universally acclaimed by Redskins fans, but, we have such a special player in Trent Williams, and boy, he's fun to watch, especially when he's healthy, which I think he finally is 100% healthy. So he's our game MVP against the Patriots. Second player, look, it has to go to Kirk Cousins. Partly because there's not a huge amount of other players it can go to, but as we already touched on, he went into New England and didn't look overawed at all. His ball placement was excellent all day. There were only a couple of passes where they weren't great, but they weren't horrible. I can't recall any horrible Kirk Cousins passes. He played, for all intents and purposes, a faultless game. As we said, his stat sheet records an interception, but nobody in their right mind places that blame on Kirk Cousins. So he gets the 2 votes. The 1 vote, another player who's appearing for the first time this year, and one who I'm surprised is getting a vote, but Will Blackman was the only defensive player to play all 100% snaps on the day. Had a forced fumble strip, got himself a turnover single-handedly, basically, and wasn't embarrassed at all. He was matched up most of the day on either Amendola or Edelman, and neither of those guys really torched the Redskins. Brandon LaFell lined up against Chris Guller for most of the day, and he led the Patriots in receptions and yards. But yeah, Will Blackman, 1 vote. Well done, Will Blackman.
All right. Yeah, nice. Nice. So the only thing that surprised me was because I know how much you like him, and he did have the interception. I'm surprised Keenan Robinson didn't make an appearance somewhere in your 3-2-1. I think it's a solid 3-2-1, and I do want to comment briefly on Trent Williams, who got the 3 this week. I completely echo what you're saying, because Trent Williams is a guy who, not only do Redskin fans universally love this guy, he's pretty well respected league wide, but I think he's underrated, underappreciated overall. Is there anyone in the league, seriously, anyone in the league, like the Redskins will be facing Greg Hardy twice, they'll be facing Jason Pierre-Paul, and they have multiple other guys. Carolina, whoever Carolina lines up is going to be good. I have no doubt that Trent Williams can handle any of them. I have no fear of anyone. No fear of anyone they put over him.
I agree. There's not a single player in the NFL in terms of a pass rusher who scares me when it's Trent Williams, who it's his job to block him. I will back Trent Williams in every single time, Mark. Every time. So I agree with you entirely. Just to touch on your point about my boy Keenan Robinson not making it, he had himself a couple of really good plays, but he didn't have his best game. He missed too many tackles and was out of position too many times in terms of stopping LeGarrette Blount and the Patriots running backs. So unfortunately, he didn't make the cut in the 3-2-1, which hurts because he's my boy.
You do. You love him.
I do. So Ed, before we wrap up, Mark, anything else to add for this week's show?
I think we have covered it outstandingly. So no, I've got nothing to add at this. I've got nothing to add at this point, other than the fact that I actually think, I'm going to say, I know we don't typically predict, I think the Redskins are going to win this week. I've just got a pretty decent feeling about it. I think they win and get to 4-5. And then, like I said, we'll just see how it shakes out with the rest of the NFC East.
Well, if there's any listeners on Twitter who disagree with Mark's prediction for a win and want to propose a little wager to him on Twitter, reach out to us. I'm on Twitter at ChadWeekoRCC. Mark is at Redskins Review. I think we can find something out there. So any listeners who think that the Redskins will lose this week, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a Redskins fan. So thinking that we'll lose is a little bit, pessimistic. But if for the sake of a fun wager, hit us up and we'll see what we can come up with. But for now, Redskins fans, thanks once again for tuning in this week. Whether you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or on our website or in Twitter or on YouTube. And we're also looking at another way you can start listening to us coming soon, so watch out for that. No details yet. It's still a little bit secret while we work it out. But wherever you're listening to us, we appreciate it. Get in touch with us. Check out our website, redskinscapitalconnection.com. And once again, let me just say thanks for listening.
I went a whole week without mispronouncing Dustin Hopkins' name.
Hey, progress. All right, Redskins fans, see you next week.
Take care.